Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Spirit of Stars Podcast, third season. And my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. It's an amazing episode because Michael Day, Board's mothership, discuss Clawfoot. Now, come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Day. Thank you so much for coming to the First of Stars podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Excited to
Oh
be
my,
here.
it's totally my pleasure to have you. So, I always start off with a question of inspiration. So, inspire your love for film and who your earliest influences.
Oh yeah, like some of my earliest influences goes back to like one of the first movies that just blew my mind away was The Matrix with the Wachowski siblings. So like
Hmm.
that was like the first DVD I ever had, and watching the behind the scenes and special features, I was like, oh my God, like that's a job. People do this, and it was like that's what like kind of just sparked everything, and it all goes back to that one moment watching that behind the scenes of the DVD.
So you've been part of a lot of very famous films. You were part of Iron Man 3 and Top Gun Maverick, including some others. So why did you feel that Clawfoot was the right film to move from, I think you were an accountant for those films, to being a director?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I always wanted to be a producer first and foremost, I'd say. And when I first started out, someone told me to get into accounting, learn the numbers, understand the budgets. And then I was doing that, and I was looking for good stuff, to produce with friends and stuff like like shorts. And just I don't know, I always had trouble finding the right team of people and everything. So I was like, someone's like, why don't you just direct it, and we'll go from there. So I was like, okay, yeah, let's just do that. And then I kind of fell in love with directing.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of the trajectory from, accounting was always just to learn producing. And then when I started producing, I was looking for good directors to work with. And then just, it was always about timing and it just never really worked out. So I started doing it myself and I just fell in love with it. And so, yeah, like then it's just been nonstop since then. Like, okay, this is what I want to do now. I want to keep directing.
So, okay, so you're going to draw a line for me, okay? The skills of being an accountant to the skills of being a director. Did you have training as a director in a different at different schools or whatnot, or was there something that you kind of learned as you went, or did something with the accounting help understand the directing aspect better?
I mean, yeah, there's not really a direct connection between the two, other than I guess just understanding, like, when I'm doing these shorts and everything, they're low budget. So just understanding how money gets spent. And as a director, just like understanding, okay, well, this is my limitations. How do I make the best out of this? How to make this look as big as possible, even though I have not a lot of money. And so I think that was kind of good seeing how money gets wasted on other films.
Hmm.
And so, okay, yeah, let's not put money there. Let's not put money there. I want to put as much money on camera as possible.
So it must be fun to be part of those big films. You know where all the bodies are buried as the accountant, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So like I said, so you moved on to being the director of a film called Clawfoot, which is a very cool film. I really enjoyed it.
Oh,
So I
thank you.
get involved with the film.
Yeah, so actually ironically, I wrote a trilogy with a buddy of mine that went to Netflix and everything. And so it was a WGA project. And so I joined the WGA through that. And when you first join, they connect you with other newcomers and you get a mentor. And so there's a group of us, and then we just kind of started sharing scripts around. And April that wrote Clawfoot, she was in my mentor group. And so she sent me her script. I read it. I was like, oh, this is like, I really like this. And I was like, this is really contained. I was like,
Hmm.
this could be done really like fairly like simple, like minimum cast, minimum locations. So like I was working with Yale Entertainment, who was financing a lot of projects like this. And so like, let me, if you don't mind, I'd like to send it over to these guys. And she's like, yeah, absolutely. So I sent over this, but like, hey guys, here's a really low budget, something that's in your wheelhouse. I'd love to direct it. I was like, is this something we could do? And they went for it. I couldn't believe it. So
Like I said, it's such a fascinating movie because it kind of starts off feeling sort of like one thing and then definitely ends up being something.
completely different.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess the trick as the director and also working with the writer is getting the audience to accept the transition when it happens and to get you to that point. So how were you laying down the breadcrumbs to know where to get the audience just enough to want to pull them into that, what is it, the last half hour, which is really kind of nuts.
Yeah. So me, that kind of goes those like fantasies that she has, where like if you notice like the fantasies like slowly, it first starts with her breaking glass on his head, then the violin, and they slowly get more and more gory to the point where you don't know like to the point where it's like, okay, I think she has these urges inside. And one little funny thing that me and the editor kind of always toy with, there's a scene where she's kicking Leo out of the house officially, and like then he's chasing her around the house, then all of a sudden disappears. And in our heads, we're like, well, that's the point where her meant like where she just breaks, and it's all fantasy from that point forward, so to speak, because
Hmm.
he kind of disappeared, and it was just her urges. So it's like the question is, did it all really happen or not?
Hmm.
And is this all just played out in her head, and her husband kind of became the sacrifice of it all as well?
Because it's kind of interesting because you have those sequences where that she's kind of like daydreaming about violence, some very violent moments. And when they occur and they unoccur, they resolve themselves. You're kind of like, oh, that's kind of a fun little moment. But when you see what later on, you kind of see that bridge. So,
Yeah.
so how much was it fun? How fun was it to plant those little seeds of, I guess, internal violence in the character before you build up, in Janet, before you build up to what was going to happen with her later?
Oh yeah, I mean, we had so much fun with that, especially like Francesca and Milo. They were so down to, take it as far as we could. We had to be we're like, okay, well, we want, like you said, a little bit of breadcrumbs here, here, and here, and slowly get a little bigger until we break and it's full on. But yeah, I mean, we had a blast doing that stuff, and it was just so much fun. Just like, I don't know, it kind of felt like a student film with like a little bit of a budget, I'd say, because we were still just leaning through, and I don't know, we made the best of every day, and then you just see some of the behind the scenes photos. Once she got all bloodied, like she was just literally just rolling around in it after the take, just having the best time ever. It's great.
Well, Francesca Eastwood, sorry, always those names. As Janet, when you're discussing the character with her and how to perform the character, before the twists, what kind of conversation were you having about how to ride the line between making her, a very real character to being someone who honestly has some serious issues as the movie rolls through?
Yeah, so we want to be very specific as to how she interacted with Milo, his character, Leo, because it's like we don't want like we gave some little breadcrumbs where she goes into like the pant like well not the pantry where she goes into the garage where she's obviously keeping the husband well fed and with liquids and stuff too and waters and we see her making the sandwiches and taking it in. So we're like, okay, we have a little bit of breadcrumbs here, but also we don't want to give too much away in the character. So that's why like she's almost like the very first half of the movie, there's not much there. She's like almost in a still of a state of shock from what happened when she, captured her husband.
Hmm.
She's just still kind of reeling from that. And now this guy's here. And so it's like you're just kind of more confused. I feel like, is he in on this? Because your husband's dirty. He has, dealings with other people, and you're just not sure who to trust. And like even your best friend, you're not even sure of how much you can give her. So that's why the whole first kind of 30, 40 minutes of it, she's kind of more of like a blank wall of just kind of
Hmm.
seeing what she can kind of say and get away with and kind of what information she can absorb from these people.
Now, a lot of that building of the tension early on, a lot of that comes through the music by Jeff Francis and Cohen Walters. So, what were the discussions like with the composers on what you kind of wanted musically for that first, let's say, 45 minutes or so of the film?
Yeah, so that was so much fun because those guys they did the trilogy that I mentioned earlier. So I've only ever worked with these guys, and so when I first reached out to them, I was like, "Hey, I'm doing this like really dark, like quirky comedy." I was like, "I want to be really weird and offbeat." I was like, "I want the music to really reflect that," and I was really big onto the White Lotus at the time of that show, and so that was a huge inspiration for the music. And so I sent it to the guys. I was like, hey, this is the style that I think really works for this. And he's like, I don't know about that. I was like, well, just give me a few samples. I was like, let's just really push the weirdness of it all and everything. And that's where he's like, all right. And then like you'll hear like monkey sounds in there, like weird animal sounds. And he's like started really pushing it. And then he like writes back, he's like, actually, Mike, this is working really good. He's like, I'm really excited about this. Like, give me another week. I'm gonna just keep playing with this. And so then he's kept playing with it. And then we just kept pushing the weirdness of it, and it just really worked, I thought, with it. And he did too. And we had a great time making that.
That's funny that you had to kind of convince the composer just how weird the film you were making.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, when you were describing the film to not only the actors but the composers, um, how did you describe it? Like, did you? Because honestly, the film, like I said, it does feel two different. You get almost two different films from the second last like 30 some minutes and the build up. So kind of like how are you explaining to them so it didn't because it's kind of a crazy film. So like how to like explain it so it makes sense to a person before they watch it.
Yeah. I was always kind of like, I referenced like Heathers, that movie from back in the day.
Yeah.
And then Yeah, just and like even like I go back to White Lotus, so like there's just like that darkness, in that dry humor to it all. It's like I really just want to push that as far as we can, but keep it as ground. I don't want it to ever not feel grounded. And so I was talking with Francesco and Milo about the characters and everything, and they just kind of instantly like, yeah, no, we see that too. That really worked. We like that. And so we never even really had a chance to rehearse because we were just limited on time and everything. We went over to Francesca's house one day. We talked about the characters, talked about the script, and then we showed up on day one filming, and we all kind of on the same page organically of what it should feel like, and everyone's kind of delivered. And yeah, I don't know, I'm just so happy with how it turned out.
Wait, it was filmed at Francesca's house?
Oh no, no, we met at her house, like me, her, and
Oh,
Milo.
I thought you also filmed it there too.
No,
It's
no,
a
yeah,
nice house.
yeah. No, we just met up at the place and just kind of discussed everything before we started filming. But yeah, we really didn't have much time to like kind of like rehearse or anything. It was just kind of like, hey, like you're gonna play this dry, you're gonna play this serious, you're gonna play this way, but like that's gonna make it funny. And like they're like, yeah, no, I get that. That makes sense. And like yeah, it was great. They all kind of just understood it.
And there's also a very interesting scene that I would love to, you to walk us, me and the listeners through. There's the one that's kind of, it looks like it's designed almost like the 1940s, 1950s, like the black and white sequence. Can you kind of
Yeah,
talk me through your approach to it and what films inspired that feel?
yeah. I mean, that the inspiration for that is like just your straight up classic film noir, like any like Sunset Boulevard, like all those ones that we just like love from back in the day. Maltese Falcon, that was another one that we kind of really referenced. And so it was interesting because like that was actually originally like the opening scene actually, and in the edit it just didn't work. And I forget why now. It was like something like she was supposed to just be watching TV in the morning or something. And then when we got into the editing, we're like, okay, let's just move things around because it just wasn't flowing right. At this point, we were really building up the fantasies. And so I was like, okay, what if at night she's watching TV and like all of a sudden now, like this is starting to be like the blur, the line between reality and her dreams and fantasies. I was like, what if she's sitting there watching TV? We see it on TV what she's watching, but then all of a sudden we go into it and then she wakes up. And just so like she doesn't even remember for the moment from watching TV to waking up. That's why she's kind of like, wait a minute, what just happened? Like it just she just started to lose her mind. And it's all just a blur now. And so that was like kind of the idea. It's like, hey, like, she's gonna play like this 50s actress because we thought that'd be a really cool scene to shoot too. And like it's kind of reminiscent of like, hey, there's a person in my house, which is like Milo, the contractor, and I don't know what to do. And then I don't know, it was just like a fun little moment just to kind of sneak in the middle, just kind of showing something that we're all kind of that influenced a lot of our work throughout the years.
So, how fun was it to experiment with an older style of filmmaking in that scene?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun because actually, we even set the cameras for black and white on that day. So it's like we're committed to this. Like it's gonna be black and white, and we're only gonna look at this as black and white. And so I mean, that was fun too with like our Jaffer Gaffer and everything. He was like the head like completely I had never lit for black and white. So then like all of a sudden we're like doing like the shades, getting like the shadows and everything different. And so yeah, it was just a lot of fun. Just like we just had to experiment, and just because we've never done black and white, and we just know what we love, and we know what we've seen in the past, and like okay, let's just try to recreate these iconic moments that we love. That's why you get that shot like the hand going up, where it's like just like those inserts are very specific back then, and we kind of wanted just to really pay homage to that.
Now, are you thinking of one day making a film almost entirely like would that be something that would be possible doing an entire film in the 40s, 50s noir style, black and white? Or you think audiences would grab that for a whole film?
Yeah, like it's interesting because I literally was just watching an old black and white film like 2 or 3 weeks ago, like another Alfred Hitchcock one I never saw, and it's interesting because like it's always like a turn off at first. It's like oh it's black and white, but then within 5 minutes the story's good. Like it just sucks you in and it doesn't matter. So I mean I think the hardest part is always getting the audience to jump on board. I mean to me I love to experiment and just try new things like, and so I would love to try that. And I think if the story's right, the audience would they would fall in love with it if it's the story. It all comes down to the story, honestly.
Now, one interesting thing about your film, um, well, there's clearly a protagonist. Jen is your protagonist. There's not necessarily what you would call a hero, I don't think, in the film,
No.
in any way. So, how are you approaching developing a film that doesn't really have like a good person really in it? and keeping the audience absorbed or empathizing with your. I don't think she's not even really an anti-hero. She definitely becomes you think definitely a bad person on some level. So how do you do that and make sure the audience is still rooting for, and because you do still root for Janet in a weird way as the story continues. So how are you building that with the character?
Yeah, so I mean, I think if you like, it all kind of comes to the head whenever she's reading that letter to her husband in the garage, and she's
Hmm.
like teary-eyed, and like there's a one specific line. She's like, "I hope you realize," she's like, I had no choice," and I think that just really shows like she like through and through, like she loves her husband, and she never wanted to do this to him. She just didn't want to be left behind. And so she just didn't know what to do. So like I think that's the thing. It's like the whole movie is the result of her just not understanding how to move forward without her husband, who, despite the money, despite, all like the house, the fashion, whatever, she really does love her husband. And so we really tried to like make that come through. And that's where like she's very particular about making the sandwich for him. And like she says, like the bolognese, well, that's not how my husband likes it. Like in the scene with Leo in the bedroom, like we have all these little things throughout where like she's still trying to do things for her husband,
Hmm.
even though he's locked up in the garage. And so I think at the end when she's reading that letter to him, you're like, oh, she just loves him to death and just doesn't know. And this is just she just kind of snapped, and this is the result of all. But you just kind of, in my mind, you're just kind of like rooting for her to like do the right thing, even though she's not doing the right thing, I guess. But like she ends up killing him, so she doesn't. But I think that just shows that like she didn't want to have a life without him, so to speak. So she's willing to go to prison, do whatever. She doesn't know what to do without him.
Well, this is a great moment. Without giving too many spoilers, I'm trying to figure out how to discuss it without ruining the film.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a moment where she towards the end where she's laying down with him. I don't want to go too much into details. And she's just kind of like there, like having that moment. So can you kind of talk me through that the importance of that moment for her and the importance for you to make sure that the audience saw that.
Yeah. So I mean, it just goes back to showing that I think like, at the end of the day, like just she like in that moment there too, without giving away, like she couldn't leave aside. And like she'd rather just get down there with him and be in that space with him as opposed to, moving on. And I think just to show like that's how much she loves him. Like that's what she'll live in that moment with him as long as she can. And then just I don't know, like, and then for some reason I kind of just wanted to break the fourth wall at the end of the eyes looking up, and just to be like just to show how crazy she is, I think too. So that was just kind of like a little fun thing for me in the audience that you could take any way you want, I'd say.
In your imagination, is there regret there?
Yeah, I mean, I think she regrets that. I mean, it's more a regret of not being able to do the right thing from the get-go. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if she regrets how it all. Yeah, she regrets how it all played out because at the end of the day, like she doesn't want to lose him. Like, and I think that's one thing me and Francesco were really and like really dialed in on. Was like, you do love him. Like, it's not about the money. It's not about anything. It's like at the end of the day, you really do love this guy. Like,
Hmm.
even though like you were the secretary at one point and he divorced someone, like you wrecked a marriage, whatever. But like at the end of the day, you do 100% love this guy more than anything in the world. And so you regret everything that, like, as long as if it didn't play out the way you wanted, like, or how it does play out, yeah, you regret that. I mean, she would regret that.
No, I think one interesting thing, how I viewed actually one of the themes of the film, or at least how I looked at it, was that I feel like Janet was very much, she's like both trapped by her wealth, but yet she can't lose it. There's like an exhaustion of living that life, and there's also the feeling that you got to keep going and keep that life at the same time. So, in your opinion, was it her action more a desire to maintain that wealth? Was it desperation? Was it a certain level that ranged from potential, maybe just exhaustion of living a life like that? How did you view it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of all of that. I mean, yeah, you kind of just kind of fall into a routine of like, you have these neighbors, you have this lifestyle. It's just I think like that's, but she also associates that with her husband because that's all because of her husband. And so to me, it's just one big universe that she was in all of a sudden that like and if you pulled the string on any of it, it just affected everything. Like if all of a sudden the clothes weren't there, the house wasn't there, like the husband, like then maybe the husband wouldn't be enough then. I think it's all
Hmm.
interconnected, and it's important that it all was maintained. That like that level of society, the wealth, the husband, the look, all of it.
So what would have been for her better to lose the husband or lose the lifestyle?
Uh, I guess for her, in my mind, like it would have been better. She would have been happier losing the lifestyle and keeping the husband,
Hmm.
and that's what she was fighting more than anything for. Like she was willing to risk it all to keep the husband.
Do you think the husband felt the same way?
No, yeah, to him, like yeah, like I said, like it's to him, it's they're a dime a dozen and they're replaceable. Like she, like it's like she's too old now for him. Like it's that simple for him. Like he has the money, like he worked really hard for this stuff, and at the end of the day, he just wants a trophy wife that that he can control. And once they age out or once they start questioning that, then he can find someone else that will fit that role for him. Because like for him, it's not love. It's just like it's possession. It's like she's just part of the possession of it all.
Hmm. So when you have I think without spoiling too much, it is an attempt for Janet and her friend to tie up loose ends, which was why certain things happen towards the end where she has to do some certain things to make sure those loose ends are tied. However, the end there is another loose end technically from the guy who sees her and her friend, with the blood. Is that a sequel waiting to happen?
It's funny. We actually joked about that. So I was like, because the reason like originally were going to have him get killed, or we had something happen. Yeah, and then like we couldn't make it work story wise, and also like timing wise, like we don't have time for that anyway. But yeah, it definitely leaves it open ended, and we've definitely had some conversations like we could do something else with this now that like this definitely there's more to the story, and it would be yeah almost like a Thelma and Louise type now thing where they're on the run something.
Because it does beg the issue that there never is a true way to tie something like that up. Once you go down that road, you kind of are forced to constantly because there's always something else that needs to be tied up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's just like then all of a sudden like one loose end leads to another loose end to another and
Right.
it's a yeah, it just doesn't end at that point.
So where can our listeners find Clawfoot?
Yeah, so right now it's available on like all streaming platforms like for like VOD like Apple, Google, Amazon, Roku, like all those ones like AT&T, anywhere you can buy or rent, it's available. And then in a few weeks they're talking now, going to deal with like a Hulu or Netflix where we'll start streaming.
So what's next for you?
So actually, next I directed another film just last year. It's called Fog of War with John Cusack, Mira Sorvino, and Brianna Hildebrand, and so like that comes out actually in November of this year, and that's like a World War II espionage thriller. It's a complete opposite of what this movie is. So it's like it's a drama thriller.
Very cool. When you're ready to talk about it, please come back. Mr. Day, you've been an absolute pleasure to talk with. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was great talking.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Virgin Stars podcast. Please like and subscribe. Turn for the next episode when Aiden Minks boards the mothership to discuss Cobra Kai. To next voyage, travel on.